Hello, hello, folks. We are going to get started very soon. Thank you for your patience. Thank you all for coming to get settled in, get your order in, get that first sip of the you have, or all right. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Busboys and Poets Books is very, very honored to present tonight Miss Carla Hall in conjunction with Tricha Elam Walker for Carla and the Christmas Cornbread, a beautiful story that really just brings to life Christmas traditions in a different light, in a different way, and quite honestly, through the lens of a Black family. And it's gorgeously, written, gorgeously drawn, but we'll get to that. There will be a read aloud at the end. And, oh gosh, and Tricha, of course. So both of our authors are local to Tacoma Park, Maryland. That's where we actually have one of our locations on the DC side. But Tricha is actually also an associate professor at Howard. Yeah, also. And you want to have, okay. We got some Howard folks up in here. See y'all. And Tricha is the award-winning author of Nana Who Goes to School, of course, which won the Ezra Keats Award that year. An amazing, amazing book. And she also just released Dream Streets. And now, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and read the people you guys are actually here to see. Please give it up for Carla and Tricha.
I worked out. Hi! Cool. On the parameters of life. You know, this has nothing to do with the book, but my motto is say yes, adventure follows, then growth. Where are you all with adventure on the parameters? Okay. Just kidding. Okay. Okay. Did you hear me? Make that little joke. I don't think they heard that. So I'm so excited to be here. Andy, thank you so much for calling me, texting me, and saying, hey, you want to do a signing? I'm like, oh, I'm only back the week of Christmas. She's like, those are perfect. And I'm like, here we are. So thank you. And Tricha and I became fast friends. I didn't know Tricha before today, and we had a conversation last night. You know, when you talk to somebody and you feel like, oh wow, I feel like I know you. First I saw her gray hair, I'm like, yay, then I saw her glasses, and then I was like, oh wow, and then we realized we were getting our glasses from one of the same places, she was mine, and so, so many connections, and so here we are.
So, Carla, so everyone's here to talk about Carla and the Christmas Cornbread. So I'd like to hear from you why you thought you wanted to write a children's book. She's done all these amazing things, as you guys know. Chef shows, and judging, and writing cookbooks. So why children's book?
You know, when you see my background, so I was a theater kid. I did theater from 12 to 17. I loved to draw. I am a board member of an organization called the Pajama Program, so I do a lot of reading in the reading centers for kids, and I am a purchaser of children's books because I love them. I think there's always a wonderful message in a very simple language, and then I love looking at the pictures. Yeah, so I put all that together, and it makes sense for me to want to do a children's book. But this book actually started out as a memoir. So I thought I wanted to do a memoir because somebody said, you should do a memoir. And I was like, well, I haven't lived enough. I feel like I need to do other things. And so I started at the beginning of my life just to see what fell out. And then I was like, I don't want to do a memoir yet. I feel like I still have some more living to do. Not that you can't do a memoir where okay, let's see, I get off track. But I always wanted to do a children's story. The woman who was working with me, Kristen Hartke, she was going to be my writer for my memoir, and then I said, I'm not going to do it. I don't feel like it's the right time, and we shifted, and then we shifted to a children's book because I've been talking for a couple of years about wanting to do a children's book, and then here we are.
Right. And so one of the things we were talking about in terms of children's books, I too grew up loving children's books. My mom was a children's librarian. We had to read, and then I learned to love to read. And she used to say children's books could solve the problems of the world because they cover so many topics and they teach lessons. So I'm wondering, did you think about that? What lessons did you feel like you wanted to convey to your readers?
I knew that I wanted to see my image. It was one about seeing my image and my family and our traditions, which happens a lot around the table. I wanted to explore my relationship with my grandmother. I wanted to have an activity with my grandmother. And part of this was also feeling like I didn't cook with my grandmother as a child. And so actually cooking with her in the book was really something that I always wanted to do. The other thing, when you look at the characters in the book, I'm from a broken family, so my parents divorced when I was 7. So you will see, I talk about my mom and my sister, but there's no father, but yet my grandfather is there. So it's also showing different family dynamics.
Yeah.
But specifically a lesson, I think it was more about relationships and intergenerational relationships.
Yes. And so I wonder how has your family read it? What do they think about it? Are they happy with it?
I mean, if they haven't read it, I'm like, do you not have 15 minutes to read my book? They have read it. My sister's like, oh, Carla, I love it. And she teaches 5th grade, so my sister Kimberly Macedo. My mother is so excited about this book. She is my #1 fan. When people tell me they're my #1 fan, my mother is my #1 fan. My mother will go into a series of bookstores. Do you have my daughter's book? And
That's what you want.
I know, that's what you want, right? You're like, she's like, I looked around and I see that you don't have my daughter's book. How would you order it? How would you go about that? I mean, she's 80 years old, so how do you talk to an 80-year-old? Do you want to be called out by an 80-year-old woman? I forgot what the question was because I
Just with your family.
Oh, they loved it. They loved it. That would be the short answer.
So the process of writing a children's book, I mean, I know you worked on summer. Did you tell her story and then you guys talk about how you're going to actually show it or fix it?
Yeah, so I told her the story, and whenever I talk about cornbread, I talk a lot about cornbread and my grandmother and how she never made cornbread before we were on the inside of the door. When we went to her house every Sunday after church, we would get there about the same time, but she still would never make the cornbread until we were on the inside of the door. And I talk a lot about that. And I talk about the anticipation of waiting for the cornbread and just, that hot skillet, and you pour the batter in and it's curling up on the sides, so those will be the crunchy bits. You're like, oh my gosh, and all the oil is soaking in. So I talk a lot about that and my connection to my grandmother. So all of this became part of the story. What I didn't know was how it was going to be illustrated. And so I went through the process of finding an illustrator, and I'll come back to that. So why don't you talk about your process, which is very different from my process because you are a creative writer.
So it's been interesting because these are my first 2 children's books. I'm usually writing for adults, so it's very different writing for children because of the idea of needing to write something that is illustratable, which I hadn't really thought of until I started trying to do this. I remember my editor saying to me, okay, that's all well and good, but no one can, draw a picture of that. So I had to think again. So for my first book, Nana Abdul Goes to School, I came up with the story, and then the publisher found the illustrator, and she was wonderful. We talked a little bit about what things were important to me, and she did all that. And ironically, I had some of her artwork at my house, and I was like, yes, this is meant to be. Yes, for 20 years I've been doing her work. And then the second book, Dream Street, was done with my cousin who's an illustrator and an artist, and she already had collages. So I got to find the story in her collages, which has been a really interesting process, very different, but it has taught me so much about looking at the artwork around here. You look at it and ask yourself, like, what is the story? You know, what's the story of that little girl's face? What's the story here? And that is, I think, a wonderful way to look at it.
So you saw a picture, a piece of art, and then you reverse engineer the story for that picture versus the other way.
Right. But it wasn't hard because her artwork was all mostly people.
Yes.
And just made me think of how we grew up in our neighborhood and what kind of a wonderful childhood we had, and that's what we wanted to do. So that's what we did.
That is even more amazing now that I've read the book and hearing that. One of the things, so a difference that I had a list of illustrators that were given to me, and I'm very visual, so I wanted to absolutely connect with those pictures, because for me, I'm visual. I also, if I'm reading an audio book, if I don't like the voice, I won't listen to the book. I may read it, but I won't listen to the book. So I went through and I saw Sharice Harris's work, and I loved it because of the vibrant colors. I love the detail in the art. I love the expressions on the faces of some of the people she was drawing. And so when I talked to her, this is her first children's book, even though she's been doing art for years. This is, we are both, our initials are CH. Both of our mothers are named Audrey. As a matter of fact, when I got my book, I was like, oh my God, they put my mother's wrong last name. And it was her mother. And so there are all of these similarities. So the same way that I feel like—
She makes connections with people. That's why I love that.
I know, I can't help but to put the dots, you know, and so if I'm looking out, I see you and your gold scarf, and then I see the other gold in the room, and I literally connect dots to the gold pieces in the room, because that's how my brain works, and I just make connections like that. So when I see all of those connections, for me, it's like, oh, I'm supposed to see that, we're supposed to be together. And so that's how I ended up choosing Sharice. And in the book, there are these little Easter eggs. I sent her pictures of my family. I sent her pictures of my grandmother. I sent her pictures of the rooms in the house. And there's a picture of a chair that my grandfather is sitting in. And so my grandfather would sit in that chair, even though he's passed away. And she's had those chairs reupholstered similar to what my grandfather was sitting in. So for us at home, like in my family, it becomes not only a picture book, but a memory, like a photo album. Even the rollers in our hair. So, you know, the pink rollers when you have a big event, and it's when you're going to a special occasion the next day, like Easter or Christmas.
We know about that.
Right? You go get your ear did, and then you can roll up the little pigtails and then the bangs. And so those are the kinds of things that I didn't anticipate talking about in the story, because I don't need the words for that. That's when the pictures tell more of the story. So back to your collage, it makes sense, because sometimes the picture with the words tell the story.
And you know, the other thing that I appreciate about you so much is your desire to infuse your culture into everything. You know, I've seen it on the cooking shows. It was so funny when we were set up to talk last night. Right before that, I was literally watching the Holiday Baking Championship. She was on there, and I was like, okay, this is not a live show because we get ready to be on Google Hangouts or whatever we were on. So, but you know, they did a whole thing about making a Kwanzaa dessert or something. Anyway, so I'm always impressed with that, and I know that that was part of, you know, your things that were important in terms of this book. I love the Black Santa. I just want to hear from you why that was important to you, and you have to tell the Black Santa story.
So the thing is, we forget how we don't see ourselves pictured out here. When I was on the Chew, the first year, it was our first Christmas of 2011, and I was like, oh yeah, I was talking about the Black Santa. And everybody thought I was the funniest thing. Oh my God, you are a riot. You are so funny talking about Black Santa.
Like it doesn't exist.
But there really is a Black Santa. You know, I was like, what do you mean? You don't know about Black Santa? And so, and there weren't producers who looked like me. So everybody out there who doesn't look like me, they didn't understand my culture, and I was having to use more words, I was having to explain, and because there was nobody to help me tell my story out here. So not only was I talent, but I was also, you know, having to tell my story. And so for me, it's really important to infuse these stories. So not only am I educating other people about my culture, but also other people who look like me can see themselves, and so they feel like their stories are just as important. And that was important for Santa to be in my image, and not to out Santa. Is there any?
No kids. There were kids at the other.
We couldn't say that Santa was fictitious. So if Santa is a fictitious character, then Santa can be in your image. Santa doesn't have to be in a particular image. When you go to Macy's in New York, there's a Latin Santa, there is a Black Santa, there's an Asian Santa, there's a European Santa, you know. And so I think these are really important. Also, because I do work so much in food, I also believe that the stories behind the food mean just as much as the dish itself. When you are online and somebody puts a beautiful picture of a dish and you respond, recipe, question mark, no! Unless you call me and I give you a 2-hour story about why this dish is important to me. Because it's the story that's really going to tell you geographically where the food came from, where the people came from, why I'm doing this dish, why it cooks for so long or it doesn't cook that long at all. All of that tells a story about our culture and our food. And that's where we are losing things by having things quick, by just looking at pictures, and we have to get back to that.
Can you talk more about the food and why, how it became important to you? I know you did a bunch of other things.
I did. I started out in, I wanted to do theater. And I didn't get accepted to the school I wanted to go to, so then I ended up going to Howard and didn't even realize what an amazing, again, my acting teacher in Nashville didn't know about Howard's drama school, so she could have said, well, Howard has a great drama school, but then I majored in accounting. So went off the rails there. So I did accounting, I graduated, got my CPA. In the middle of that, I was like, I hate this, I think I'll model. So I started modeling, and then it was there in Paris that I started cooking. And really cooking wasn't because I loved it. I started cooking as a form of gratitude for people allowing me to sleep on their couches. You know, it was just very practical. Yeah. And so eventually, and then I went to culinary school at 30. I wanted to make the French food. I was in Paris and I was really excited about the French food because that was the pinnacle of when you go to a school, that's what they were teaching. They weren't teaching my food, they weren't teaching other cuisines. I mean, it was a footnote. I mean, after a whole year of doing, or a month of doing eggs, you may get like 10 minutes of doing something else, right? So I thought that was the be all and end all. And I remember going back to my grandmother and she was doing her macaroni and I said, oh, Granny, I think your sauce is broken. And she's like, well, I think it's separated. Child, that wooden spoon came out so fast, you didn't see it coming. You know, I mean, for me to talk about my grandmother's food and to compare it to a whole other culture, right? And so I didn't want to do fried chicken. After I spent all this money, well, I spent my grandmother's money, I didn't want to do fried chicken. I steered clear of it. And it wasn't as important to me until I did Top Chef. And this was crazy because it was later. I mean, I was 44 when I did Top Chef. People were like, oh, you're the girl who does the comfort food. Oh, I mean, and all these people were talking to me about what their impression of me was. And it wasn't even, I just didn't get it. I didn't get it until I went to the African American Museum, which is not that old, And I had a restaurant which I called Carla Hall's Southern Kitchen. I still didn't call it soul food. And it was only when I saw all of the wonderful work and reasons that I should be proud, and the work that Dr. Jessica B. Harris did with all of the different stations, North, South, Creole Coast, and the West, you know, of how our food made a difference in the contributions that we made, that I was like, oh my gosh, I've been sleeping on this. And that's when I started doing more of my food, and that's when I started traveling around to try to get those stories. And so that's sort of my journey. It became food that was just food that was beautiful. Then it became food with a story. Then it became food that was about my story. Now I'm in a space where, you know, if my grandmother came here today, what would that food look like? Because she came from sub-Saharan Africa. And so I'm trying to pull all of that. Like, what does my DNA look like on a plate? And that's what I'm trying to get to.
That restaurant was amazing, by the way.
At the museum?
Yes.
Yes, Chef Jerome, amazing. I was the ambassador. I was the one who said you should come.
So what's next? More children's books, more cookbooks?
I hope I do more children's books. I love this genre. I think that it is like cracking open a beautiful brain when you cook with kids and watch them learn and watch them understand steps and process and eating something that they didn't think that they would eat because they made it. You know, I just think that there's so much there, and I love the pictures. And quite frankly, it's a faster process than a cookbook. I mean, I am a tourist. Very practical. Yeah.
So will it be food in the next children's book?
There will always be food. I don't think I can do a book without food. I would love to do a book about me creating Bubba. So that character, Bubba, that I've been drawing since 5th grade, he makes an appearance in the book. And that was also another picture in the process that I sent to the illustrator. And yeah, I always want there to be an activity. Because I'm also, well, one of the lessons that I did think about, I'm always thinking about what did kids do before a device? You know, and so I know I go on these color walks. It's like it's a scavenger hunt with colors. We start, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna choose pink, and then I'll ask Tricha, what's your color? Leopard print. Trisha's gonna choose leopard print, so she's gonna be looking for somebody with these shoes. Okay, she's not gonna come back home with 2 more pictures. And so when I go, I love you. When I go outside, you choose a color inside, you go out, you start walking around, and you're looking for your color. And you take pictures of only things that color. And so when you come back, you get to share your perspective. But what happens is you're actually very much in tune and present because you're looking for this thing. It could be numbers, it could be shapes. So that's the next book that I want to do.
I mean, that's why I think children's books are so important. And, you know, just encouraging kids, I mean, those of you who are looking for things to give to some kids for gifts, books, you know, things that encourage them to play, go outside, to create, to be creative. I mean, that is just amazing. I love that you have the recipe of it too. So is that to encourage like, people to cook with their parents or grandparents?
Yes. And as you talk about that, Tricia, and that was important because I really try to encourage people to either, especially now that there's Zoom, have one of your elders or somebody who cooks in your family cook through Zoom, and you can save that tape. Because how often do we have something tangible to hold on to see somebody cook? Or tell a story and record them telling that story, because you never know when you're going to get that story again, because, or to hear their voice, you know, telling those stories. And I just encourage people to do that, to really think that, you won't think about it if you're younger. As you get older and you don't have those moments anymore, and they're gone. Yeah.
I'm just curious, have you ever judged a kid's cooking?
Yes.
I want to know about that, because those are amazing.
No, they're amazing, but you're always like, am I going to ruin you as a candidate? You know, because, everybody can't get a blue ribbon. And then when that kid has to go home and they're crying, you're like,
I'm like this.
I'm crying too. Yeah, that's hard, but they are amazing. I mean, these kids, just the way that they think. I remember doing this one, it was like Chop Junior or some cooking thing. This kid threw everything but the kitchen sink in there. Then you taste it, you're like, what? Why does this work? It's like he was a savant. It just worked. And he's like, oh my gosh, too many notes, but it wasn't. It all worked. It's just amazing because they have this inherent gift. Yeah. Well, let me ask you, let me go back to you, because what was the biggest difference between your two books and how the process was?
The biggest difference was, as I mentioned, with Dream Street, having to look at the pictures. The pictures existed first, and trying to find the story. And it was funny because, after I sort of looked at it, so other people decided, whoa, these are people with dreams, they live on Dream Street, okay, it all comes together. And we started sending it out, and publishers and editors were like, no, it's not a kid's book, it's not a picture book, it's something else, maybe, but it's not this. And we tried to switch it around and make it something different, and it didn't feel like it worked at all. And finally, it took a couple of years, we found an editor and a publisher who said, you know what, we love this. This is it. Just the way the originals are. So you don't give up. That's what I
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, I mean, because I think that if you really truly feel like something in your heart is you're presenting it the way that it should be presented, that you shouldn't give up. You really should. That's the thing. It's like, no, I don't want to do well for me. So it would be, because I'm in this process now. I presented something. They're like, no, can you change it?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, do I want to do more homework? No, I do not. I'm going to go and shop it around because I don't want to do more homework because I'm not that I'm lazy, but it doesn't seem efficient.
Yeah, you're absolutely not lazy.
Yeah.
Doing those sort of things.
It's so funny. In my head, I'm a little lazy, but I know I'm always running around. So, should we read the book? Yeah, all right, let's read. I need a copy. You are on it, talk on it. Are you all ready to hear a children's story?
Yes.
Okay, hi y'all. Thank you very much.
And wait till you hear how she reads. I learned so much.
Okay, you want to take a book to show the
Oh yes, I need a book to show the pictures.
Okay. I guess there won't be a lot of talk back because usually I ask questions to the kids that are here. Actually, I'm going to pretend like they're here. Hello. Hi, Sandy. Hi, Jamaica. Carla and the Christmas cornbread. It's Christmas Eve, one of my favorite days of the year. That's when Mama, my sister Kim, and I go to Granny's house to celebrate the best holiday ever. What is it? Christmas. Thank you. You participated. Yes, Christmas. Every year, I pack my holiday pajamas and my trusty sidekick Bubba. And every year, I ride in the back seat, which is always packed high with Christmas presents. The best part of the ride is watching the lights twinkle on the houses as we whiz by. When I see the sign that says it's 20 miles to Lebanon, I know that we're almost at Granny's house. Granny makes the best cornbread in the whole wide world. Cornbread is my favorite. Kim fiddles with the radio and finds a station playing the Jackson 5. Santa Claus is coming to town. We all sing along. Almost there. Granny is looking out of the window when we pull into the driveway. Granny, is the cornbread ready yet? I shout. Well, Merry Christmas to you too, Carla and Bubba. Merry Christmas, Granny, I say. Is the cornbread ready yet? Now that you're here, I can start baking it, she says. And you know I'm disappointed. I've already been on that car for an hour. Granny pulls the cast iron skillet out of the heated oven and pours cornbread batter into it. Hiss! Hot! The batter crackles as it hits the hot pan. Little bubbles dance around the edges. Granny uses her big oven mitt to put the skillet back in the oven. 20 more minutes until the cornbread is done. I can't wait. And little Sandy, why did she use that oven mitt? That's right, because it's hot. Yes, you must be careful. Merry Christmas! We hear our grandpa call from the front door. Where are my girls? Grandpa is a doctor, and everyone calls him Doc, even us. He scoops up Kim and me and gives us a bear hug. When Doc settles into his chair, this is the chair that's from my grandmother's house in real life right here. Bubba and I search for our favorite ornament on the Christmas tree. It's a Santa with his big bag of toys. And guess what? He looks just like me. Doc, where do you think Santa is right now? I asked. Well, he's probably all the way across the ocean, bringing presents to the children in France. You thought I was going to say the North Pole, didn't you? Nope, he's in France. He's fancy. Doc pulls a big book off the shelf. He shows me a picture of the Eiffel Tower in Paris. When I was young, way before your mother was born, I went to France, he says. I ate snails cooked in butter. I think about the snails that leave slimy trails on the lettuce leaves in Granny's garden every spring. Yuck! I don't think I'd like to eat snails, I say. They have lots of other things to eat in France, Doc says, laughing. You should try everything, because you never know what you might like. Yes, are you an adventurous eater, Eddie? Mm-hmm. Just then, Granny calls us to dinner. We settle around the table to eat thin fried pork chops smothered in gravy. That was one of her favorite dishes. They were so tender, oh my gosh. Green beans, and my favorite, Granny's cornbread. Tomorrow, when all the aunts, uncles, and cousins come over, the table will be growing with pans of macaroni and cheese, glazed ham, deviled eggs, because it's not a party. If you're from the South, you don't have deviled eggs. Cream spinach, collard greens, sweet potato pie, not pumpkin, baked apples, and popcorn balls. Okay, we didn't have popcorn balls, but my husband likes popcorn, so I threw that in there so he could feel loved. After dinner, Mama sends Kim and me upstairs to put on our jammies. You can help me put together a puzzle, but you can't stay up too late, she warns, or Santa will have to go on to the next house. When Bubba and I come back down to the dining room, there is the most perfect sugar cookie sitting on the plate. Oh, look at that cookie. Pink with sprinkles. Oh, I take a big bite, because that's what I do, and I'm still doing it on the baking shows. Carla, Kim yells, that's Santa's cookie. I stop chewing. The cookie turns to dust in my mouth. My eyes fill up with tears. I ate Santa's snack. What if Santa puts me on the naughty list? You won't come tonight. There will be no presents, and everyone will know I did a not so great thing. Christmas will be ruined. Carla, come here, Granny calls out. I'm in big trouble. I'm sure of it. I drag my feet toward the kitchen. But when I get there, Granny is smiling. It's okay. Santa likes cookies, but he really likes kids who are kind and sweet like you, she says. Don't worry about that old cookie. I've got a better idea, she says. Granny pulls out a tiny cast iron skillet and then cornmeal, buttermilk, and eggs. We'll make Santa a special Christmas cornbread, she says. Granny oils the pan and puts it in the oven. She shows me how to mix together the cornmeal, baking powder, and salt, the dry ingredients. Then whisk in the eggs and buttermilk. And pour the batter into the hot skillet. I'm holding the bowl so that Granny can pour it into the skillet so that the little Carla doesn't get burnt. Finally, Granny puts the pan back in the oven. While the cornbread bakes, Granny puts soft butter, not hard, like soft butter that you can stick your finger into and pull it out. There's a little hole there, soft. Sugar, cinnamon, and a touch of almond extract. By the way, that was her secret to her sweet tea, which I didn't know until I cooked with Paula Ding, but that's a whole other story. Right. So she puts all of that in a bowl and gives me a spoon to mix it up. Cinnamon butter. And don't think I didn't drag my finger in that bowl when we were transferring it to another bowl. When the tiny cornbread is ready, Granny cuts it into wedges and puts the pan on a tray with the cinnamon butter and a glass of cold buttermilk. Well, when I was a little kid, that's what older people drank, and Santa is older. Bubba and I put the tray next to the tree. Looks good, says Doc. Santa gets tired of all those cookies, I bet. Still, when Kim and I settle into bed, I feel so sad about eating Santa's cookie. I hope he loves cornbread as much as I do. I close my eyes, and quick as a wink, it's time to wake up. It's Christmas morning. Kim, wake up, I cried. She never liked when I did that. She wanted to sleep in, but I made sure she didn't. I kept yelling at her. Bubba and I peeked downstairs. I'm happy to see that there are presents, and all the cornbread is gone, except for one little wedge. And there's a note. Who do you think the note is from? Santa. You are paying attention. Santa. Dear Carla, thank you for the cornbread. It was very good. I saved a piece just for you. Merry Christmas, Santa. It's the best Christmas ever. Thank you. Any questions? Anyone wondering about Santa and where he went next? What country?
I have a question for both of you.
Yes.
I'm also a collector of children's books. I'm probably older than both of you. But I'm wondering what were some of the first books you fell in love with? And I know they weren't with Black authors because when I started reading, there were no Black authors. There was nobody looking like me.
Right.
So I'm wondering what some of your early favorites were.
So the question is for the people at home, what were some of our favorite children's books when we were kids? And because there was a variety of like Black authors, realizing that we didn't have that option. You go ahead, Tricia.
It's interesting because that was a big deal for my mom, being a librarian, and she really searched and searched. But I was born in the 50s, so they weren't in positive depictions, let's say that. But I do remember loving books that were about mischievous little girls, like Madeline and the 12 Little Girls. I don't know if this rings a bell at all. But they lived in an orphanage, and they did everything. They walked into straight lines, and Madeline always got out of line, and you remember, okay, got in trouble. And also Eloise, who was very mischievous.
Eloise!
She lived in a hotel, she went to Paris, did all this stuff, and so those were some of the things I remember.
The books that I remember that I loved pop-up books because I love those pictures, and it was the picture, but it was also the the engineering to get them to pop up. I always wanted to take them apart to figure out to figure out how they worked, and I love paper, and I still buy pop-up books, pop-up cards, and all of that. I remember we had a huge book of nursery rhymes, which I love, and interestingly enough, all of those nursery rhymes, I was in a play when I was around 12, and it was nursery rhymes, and we were singing nursery rhymes. Georgie, Porgy, pudding and pie, kissed the girls and made them cry. When the girls came out to play, Georgie, Porgy, ran away. Oh, no. Only here, because you're stuck here. That's why I'm saying it from you. So for me, it was the nursery rhymes that I loved, because they were short, happy, and I would always repeat them. Anybody else?
Both of you could answer, please. I love to read, and I'm a grandmother of 2 girls now, 10 and 4. How can I encourage them to put down the cell phone, all the TV shows, and read not only the books that I'm going to purchase today, but also to get that desire, that drive? Because, I know I love it. It must be natural. I remember being in the house reading while my sister and brother and I were playing. And I just love books. So what ideas do you want that I can get to, make them realize that they get learning from it. And not only that, I love the books because it relates to our culture.
I love that you asked that question. Did they spend
Repeat the
time?
question for them. Repeat the question for them.
Oh, so the question was, how can she encourage, she has 2 granddaughters, how can she encourage them to put down their cell phones and computers, etc., and read and enjoy reading when they visit her, I think. Can you have like a story time? I think I'd make a big deal. I don't have any grandkids as yet, but I have grandparents on me. But anyway, I would, I feel like I would make a big deal of it. We're gonna have story time and have some nice little snacks, and then you can read to them, just like, be really animated. My father used to read like you did, and we just loved it. And really make it a big deal, then they'll look forward to the other.
No, I think that's a really great idea. You have to make it an event. Just like TikTok and YouTubers is an event. I know it takes effort, but it'll pay off because those are the moments that your grandkids will remember. Also, I remember when I was in school and I would order books, Scholastic books. Does anybody remember Scholastic books?
Yeah.
And we used to get it was like Christmas, just the smell of a book. So Tricia, did you smell your book when you first got it?
Yes.
Right? You just like open that book and you smell and you like crack open the same, and there's something that's so visceral. I still remember what the book smelled like. And so I think make it an event, make it something special that they can only get with you. That, and that's the thing. I think it's such a great idea.
The other thing I want to shout out the libraries. The librarian grandma, mother, is still with me. Make a big trip to the library. We used to go to the library, got a library card. We love getting a library card and picking up, and then you can get as many books as you can carry. That way they're, also, yes, 5 books, but take them there and let them pick out whatever and carry them home and go back again and just it is truly important.
Anybody else? Are there people online who are asking questions?
There are people online, and they've been talking until questions. So Gwendolyn M. Hayes says, you don't have to be a child to enjoy great children's stories.
Oh my gosh, Gwendolyn and Paige, you don't have to be a child to enjoy great children's story. As a matter of fact, on the way over here, we're listening to Donna Washington, who is a storyteller, and she has a wonderful voice. And Tricia and I were listening to her tell a story called Too Much Noise on her YouTube channel. And she does anybody know Donna Washington? If you don't find her, she is amazing. When she did a talk back with me, it was a virtual one, and I said, Donna, I really just want you to count from 1 to 10. And she was just like, 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, it was just amazing. I can't do it like she did, but it was honestly amazing. As an adult, I was like this. I became a child again.
Yeah, she makes like sounds of doors creaking and people walking across the floor. So she's pretty amazing. But I think that's so true. My mom used to give children's books to adults as gifts, and I now carry on that tradition because they're wonderful. People can read them very quickly, and the illustrations are usually so astonishing. They're art. You know?
Yeah, I buy children's books for myself. So what's that? What? Anybody else?
We have Norma McDowell Jackson who said, I taught kindergarten for 25 years and my favorite time of the day was story time. Do you guys have any, well, do you have grandkids and do you read to them and what's your favorite?
Hey Norma, I'm glad that you do story time. I don't have any grandkids. I have a son. One of the things that I do, I used to spend a lot of time in driving around because I had a catering company and I would put on the classical station, but I would make up stories. And so when there was all these big crescendo and all this music, and I was like, and then this happened, and then it would drop down and something happened. Then I was like literally in my car. If anybody saw me from another car, I would be like, this. But that's just me. But so that's also that theater kid, you know.
I've been doing a lot of virtual story times, going around, promoting the books with different schools, and I love it, and the kids love it. It seems to be such a special time. They listen really well. They have the most amazing questions, so it actually is one of my favorite things to do.
Well, one of the things that I realized when this picture book came out that I really I love reading. So one of the things, and I've always said I want to go back to also doing scripted television and stuff in addition to food. Because I mean, you see so many actors having cooking shows and cookbooks. And, I'm like, why can't I go the other way? So, but I do want to do voice acting and to do. I've done a couple of appearances for animations, but I would love to do more of that. And it's about the storytelling because I see the story in my head,
Okay.
And so it is.
It's
An observation.
Yes.
I made. The illustrator of your book gave you all the same nose. I found that fascinating.
Okay. Yes.
Gave you all the same nose.
If you see my grandmother and my mother and me, not so much my sister, but I know my mother is 81. I know what I'm going to look like at 81. My grandmother was 96. My great-grandmother was 103. Because I'm competitive, I have to live until 104. We all have the same nose. Yeah.
She did justice.
Oh, thank you so much. And then my grandmother, whenever she was taking pictures, she would never do a front-facing picture. You would always see her like this. And I sent those pictures to the artist, and I told her this story. So I think that she really focused on the nose. Yeah, great observation.
Right. Here's a question.
Yes.
I noticed that one of you was supposed to be the primary interviewer, and the other one was the person to be interviewed. But the interaction between you is much more that interactive. What did you want to accomplish with that?
That's because of her. She's amazing.
So the question was, he said that he thought that he noticed that it was supposed to be an interviewer-interviewee type of a relationship up here, but we have been going back and forth because it's a conversation. I think it's much more interesting to have a conversation. I think that by reading Tricha's books, and I love them, I'm just as interested in understanding her story and sharing her story and showing the diversity in stories and how we get our books out there. And so that's just as much a part of, I think, this exchange and this book as anything else. So I said to Tricha, I said, I really want this to be a dialogue. I don't want you to talk at me. I mean, she's an accomplished children's book author, and I want to celebrate her as well.
Thank you so much.
That's so sweet, thank you. Anybody else? Anything? Is everybody ready to make some cornbread?
Yes.
And by the way, the cornbread in the book, you can double and quadruple the recipe. You can absolutely double it. You can quadruple it. It still will work out fine. And in terms of the cornmeal, do not get a coarse cornmeal. With you go to the store, you're like, oh, I'm going to be fancy. I'm going to get this stone brown cornmeal that's chunky. Ain't gonna work. Not gonna work. Don't be fancy. Yes?
Is the Snowy Day still a perfect book to be read?
Oh my God, I'm so glad you mentioned the Snowy Day. Okay, because I remember other books that I love. Okay, yes. Yes, the Snowy Day. Also, I love Shel Silverstein.
Yeah.
The Giving Tree, even though, the Giving Tree, the missing piece, when I was young, we were actually performing the Giving Tree. And so that was a book that I loved. And then I went and bought all of his other books, but A Snowy Day. And there was another book that is escaping me that we had. It'll come back to me. But thank you for bringing that up. Yes, yes.
The Snowy Day, I remember when it came out, it was in 1962. And it was a big deal for us because it was a little brown boy. The author's white, but that felt important to him to do. And I think the reason why it's still so important is because it's just it's not a big deal. He's just playing in the snow with his sled, throwing snowballs, but he happens to be brown. So it's a story everyone can read and appreciate and can normalize people who look different, from people who think they're the main people in the world. So it's a great book.
Yeah, yeah. All right, we're here to sign books and thanks everybody for tuning in from home. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. This has been fun. Ask any questions as you come up there.